Welcome to Faith Fondue, a new podcast featuring author and speaker Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue will feature a melting pot of topics ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. Each week will feature a theme, and the theme for this week's episode is Lent, Week 5, Palm Sunday. Hi, Anne. It is the week of March 21st, and we are getting closer to Palm Sunday and Holy Week. But first, let's talk about this past week. How was it, and how was your second vaccine shot?
Yeah, thanks, Haley. Good to be here. The week of, March 21st. Well, first, there was a lot to celebrate last week, Haley, with St. Patrick's Day. And we're going to talk a little bit about St. Joseph's Day. So some great saints. I did have a realization on St. Patrick's Day, Haley. You and I grew up in a time where there was some great Irish music. I guess particularly with U2. So on St. Patrick's Day, students would wear green, in school. And I feel like, I don't know, we'd always listen to U2 or the Pogues or something. And then in the 90s, I don't know if you remember this, there's an Irish band, The Chorus. It's three sisters and their brother. So talented. They combine like traditional Irish music with rock music. I think the head singer, Andrea Corr, has just an incredibly beautiful voice. So, when students walk into class, I usually play a song. So I thought, oh, what song would I want to play? Like, even Oasis, they're English, but they have Irish roots. So I was like, who could I play? And you guys have missed out. Like, you don't have an Irish band. And one of my other teachers was like, you can play Flogging Molly. And I was thinking, I'm not going to play Flogging Molly, but I understand because they're, again, another Irish, band. So I don't know. Did you thought about, how was your St. Patrick's Day?
So it was great. Yeah, I was in South Bend, which is always an interesting time for us as students, or when we were students, to celebrate St. Patrick's Day at Notre Dame. A lot of students who are there right now, I know, had a number of tests that day. I think that the teachers kind of planned that on purpose, maybe or maybe not. I said to my husband, I feel like I need to drive around and figure out where all the students are, because it seemed a lot quieter on campus than it did, in some of the St. Patrick's Days we had. But we did take out from an Irish pub and had just a couple friends for dinner, and didn't drink green beer, but probably had a glass or two of wine, and it was a nice day.
Good.
And I hadn't thought about Irish music. That's really interesting. Of course, I have some Irish in me. I'm really kind of a European mutt, so there's not a predominantly, there's not one background that I come from. So I, again, wasn't raised Catholic, wasn't raised Irish, really. But I have to tell you, I remember very clearly, I'm sure you do too. I was, I believe, a freshman at Notre Dame, although maybe I was a sophomore. And Sinead O'Connor was
Oh,
on Saturday Night Live,
wow.
right? Remember that? And
Yes,
she,
another good Irish example,
a
Haley.
great
Yeah,
one, except
Van
for
Morrison. We're
Van
gonna,
Morrison. Yep.
yes, because I think
Uh,
she's Northern Irish, but
she is, but
continue.
remember she ripped up the picture of the
Yes,
Pope
yes,
and that was really, when I read it at the time, it was shocking, of course, right? And
yes.
was a huge brouhaha. But when I read about it later on, it was because, the real scandal in the Catholic Church hadn't broken here in the United States,
Um,
but it had in Ireland. And so
oh,
she was trying to, we were all appalled by it, or Catholics certainly were here in the United States.
of
Uh,
course, sacrilege.
Yes, but as an Irish woman, she was
Mm,
trying to raise awareness, and because it was a very prevalent story at the time in Ireland, and of course, this is all before social media, so we weren't real privy to that. It hadn't made its way to the United States, so. Um, but I loved her music, and she was pretty popular when we were in college. But so
there was.
maybe next year I'll have to pay homage to Sinead
Yes.
O'Connor on St. Patrick's Day. But it was fun. It's a fun day. It's a day to have a good time, and just kind of
Yeah.
celebrate friendship and our Irish friends.
Amen. Yeah, her song "Nothing Compares
Compares
to
to you.
You," written right by Prince. So,
Yes.
fortunately, I was able to celebrate on St. Patrick's Day. But if you had asked me that maybe a couple days earlier, I don't know that I would have said I would have been able. I did have a very strong reaction to the vaccine, to answer your question. So when the CDC lists side effects, that those are there for a reason because it was almost like prescribed. I had every last side effect that they said you might possibly have. Um, my arm was unduly sore, and then the chills, the fever, the nausea, and the headache, all of it. And I think when you are sick, it is such a lesson in humility. And I don't want anyone to have to go through that to appreciate their body or their health or well being. But wow. And I knew it wouldn't, I knew this would happen potentially. And I think that's what's interesting is that some people don't have side effects and they're totally fine. And then you might have it. And I honestly thought I would, just knowing kind of with my heart health and how I've reacted to the flu in the past and the norovirus. So I was anticipating it. And, my advice for any listener is two things. One of my friends said, let yourself sleep. And, for anyone who's kind of a go, go, go person, um, letting yourself sleep is not the natural, response. At least for me, I don't really let myself sleep because I'm worried, oh, I might not sleep well tonight. Well, I'll do it. And then the second, Tylenol broke the fever. So thank you, Tylenol. I am very appreciative. And, it probably took me, I was probably 48 hours before I was back to normal. So very humbling.
Well, and thank you for getting the vaccine. That's a big topic going around right now for some people as well. But the more people who can get it, the better. I know we're all looking forward to getting back to some semblance of, a normal life. And there is that light at the end of the tunnel. And it is because, people like you are willing to take those side effects in stride and get that vaccine. So we're going to, again, stay away from any politics, but that's just science. Get the vaccine.
You're right. And, Haley, it's great to be on this side of it. Right. And you are too, obviously. And it's like, yeah, I can, there's a weight that's been lifted in terms of fear, largely. So it gives you freedom. And I would say anyone who's thinking about it, not only for the common good, but also for, the freedom that it offers you. Freedom's at a cost. And yeah, I had to get the appointment, make the time for it, go through that, but I'm good now.
Yeah,
So
I know. It
yeah,
does.
good.
It feels
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So let's
Oh,
do it.
good. So, all right. So that was St. Patrick's Day, and then of course, we celebrated the feast of St. Joseph, and we can talk about that a little bit during our spiritual stew, because we pray to St. Joseph all the time. But last Sunday was Laetare Sunday. Going back to the fourth Sunday in Advent, and I didn't know this. But, well, I did know this part. Notre Dame has the Laetare Medal, which is the highest honor given to Catholics in the United States. And the Notre Dame presents it at graduation every year. And the speaker speaks, the recipient speaks, which is, always of interest to me. But what I didn't know is that Notre Dame announces the winner of the Laetare Medal on Laetare Sunday, which of course makes sense.
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah.
Right. Um, but it was just really neat. I was with my coach last week, Tim Welsh, and we were, on Laetare Sunday, and we were getting ready to celebrate Mass together, with you online. And Notre Dame put out the press release about the Laetare Medal winner. And so we got to kind of celebrate that together. And that was kind of when all the worlds collided, and I realized that that's when it happened. But the winner,
Awesome.
yeah, the winner is, or the recipient is Carla Harris, and we'll put a link to her online in the show notes. But man, she's super impressive, and the graduates this year are going to be, I think, really lucky to not only hear her speak, but I hope hear her sing.
Oh,
She is a recorded gospel artist.
awesome.
Yes.
Yes. Wow.
I know. How awesome would that be to have
Yeah.
a recording artist, a gospel singer, also very successful in her professional life, in business, but think that's pretty cool. So it was a good week. And of course, it is March. So it is the beginning of spring, but with March comes March Madness, which, Ann and I are both big sports fans. So this is an exciting time, I think, for people who aren't big sports fans. I think the average Joe pays attention to college football or college basketball at this time. And I got to tell you, this is the first time, and I think it's 24 years that there is not a Notre Dame team in either bracket.
It's hard to believe, coming from the women's side in
Right.
particular. And, I was thinking about, any coach or sports fan knows there are certain teams that are just super special. And we could talk about the women's there's so many women's teams I could think of in recent years that are really special. But I think is it the 2015 team with Jaron Grant and Pat Connaughton,
Yes.
and they were so close in the Great Eight to beating Kentucky, and heartbreaking, but what a journey, and
Yeah.
what a team to celebrate. And on the women's side, obviously 2018 when the women won the national championship, Rike Ogunbowale and Mayberry, all of them, Jess from, there's so many great players, but it was so unexpected. And that was the beauty of that. That team returned the next year and actually lost, close to the buzzer.
Right.
But they had been so injured. Brianna Turner is her name, and she, had been injured largely for most of the 2018 season. I don't even think she played in and she was a real leader and talented player, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
she didn't play. And I remember hearing Coach Muffet McGraw at the time say that season they had more ACL injuries
Oh,
than they did losses.
yeah.
So they lost more players to ACL
Wow.
injuries than they
That's
did to games. Isn't that amazing?
it's an incredible stat. It's super
It's an
interesting.
incredible stat.
Leave it to Coach
So,
McGraw
yeah.
for speaking the truth. And she had a response for our listeners who may or may not have seen a player from University of Oregon, women. She did kind of an expose of the weight rooms that are afforded to the women's team and the men's team. The women are in San Antonio, the men are in largely Indianapolis, and just the difference, the sheer inequality of facilities and what is offered. And I'm, Haley, you as a D1 athlete, I am curious, what is your experience of I'd like to start with just you lifting weights. So I'm not asking about your access or the facilities for women, but just what was that like for you and your teammates?
It's interesting. There's a lot of things looking back in hindsight that I realize were not ever really an issue for me. I know, I played, I started in college in 1991. That's a time when there wasn't a lot of parity between women and men's sports. They were still working on Title IX and trying to even things out, but I actually never felt that way. I never felt slighted as a female student athlete at the time. I don't even think I thought about it. And I would say the same thing was true. I've always lifted weights, at least starting in high school. So that was
So in
always,
high school you did.
yeah, starting in high
Mhm.
school. Yep, I hadn't
Yeah.
done that before. And we've carried that through even with parenting. I don't really think there's a need, when your body is still developing and changing in middle school. I don't think you need to lift weights. I think you could probably do more damage there. I think there's enough you can
Yeah.
do just with your body weight. That's enough, in those middle school years. But so I started in high school, and it was dry land. I think of dry land as less time I had to be in the pool. So I loved it. But it was always a regular part of my training. And I never felt, we would lifted weights with the guys. With the men's team, of course, we were a single team at the time. So for me, it was just, I've always lifted weights. It's just always been part of my training.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I am curious because I am someone who still lifts weights regularly. I don't know, what if I was going to ask you, is it fun for you? Do you enjoy lifting weights?
So I do. So it's interesting because of course now I'm not an athlete. But I think it's becoming more mainstream. I think,
Mhm.
as I lifted weights as an athlete because that's what we did, right? That was part of our
Yeah.
training. And then I probably didn't. I think it was not a common way to work out for the non-athlete, right? For the regular aerobics, running, walking, jazzercise woman was not lifting
Yeah.
weights forever.
Step
Um,
aerobics, jazz. Oh my goodness.
exactly.
Yeah.
Any of
Yeah.
those, right? We weren't lifting
Yes.
weights. And if we were, it
That's
was like five
fair
pounds.
miss. Yeah.
Right. Right. Or Jane Fonda, any of those things that we all did. But I do think there is a trend, but I do think it's coming back. I think we're realizing that, lean muscle is a great thing to have. I think with women as we age, it's good to keep our bones strong. I think women are understanding more of the health benefits of it.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that's, as you had mentioned, I think that's more up and coming and not necessarily something that we grew up with as mainstream. It was more just athletes who
Yeah.
lifted weights.
Yeah. No, I am curious about it because if this story had run, I don't know this, but the story had run 20 years ago. I don't know the traction it would have gotten. And obviously, we live in a time where the emphasis is on equality. And, I do think, I do think you have to provide equal facilities because it at least allows the opportunity. Now, do more male basketball players lift weights than female basketball players, or like more often, more regularly? I don't know the answer to that, but just again, the access piece is what is being promoted by having, facilities, and it's at the highest level. So this is like, they're providing the best of the best, right, to these players, and what an honor to be there. And they're in this bubble and things like that. I do hear a lot of women at my gym. So I'm at a co-ed gym, and women will talk about feeling intimidated about going into the weight room. Again, this is not younger women though. This is maybe women my age, maybe a little older, maybe some a little bit younger. If they're a newer member, they just feel like this is a place, like it's a different environment. It's a unique environment. It's the weight room, right? And you get to know the people. And so I can understand, that's not been my experience where I felt intimidated, but I can understand how a woman might feel that way, but I can also understand how a man might feel that way. And then, I am not someone who lifts heavy weights at all. I can't do that. And occasionally some of my buddies will give me a wisecrack, and I want to be like, I have a heart condition, but I just, I laugh it off and play. I'm there, and you have to kind of not care. But it's an interesting environment to kind of look at, again, dynamics between people. And I do think, yeah, in the 90s or when we were young, it really was about not bulking up. There was fear that you would get big, as
Right.
opposed to, you mentioned lean muscle mass. So, hopefully those things have changed. I definitely see it changed in the number of, again, young women, many of them who were collegiate athletes, just working out really hard, inspiring to everybody around us. And I know basketball players today, there's so many female basketball players that are over 6'3", 6'5". And I'm thinking, how can anyone like go up against some of these really strong athletes? Well, they're lifting weights. They're strong women themselves. And so it's paying off. It's paying dividends for
Yeah,
these folks.
and I mean, there's so much wrong with what took place in the tournament with the weight room, starting with the fact that it even just started off with such a discrepancy. But, then you have the video I saw where the NCAA put out some sort of response where they said, well, we didn't have the room to put in the same facility. And then, of course, there's the video that pans to the half empty ballroom, connected to the weight room, which, let's face it, that wasn't even a weight room. That was a weight rack that they had there.
I
But
thought it was a joke at first because it
y-
was so bad. I mean,
right.
I really did.
I
I
mean,
was like,
that's like in my house. I have that in
yeah,
my, that's about the number of weights I have in my house. But and it's not that, and the point actually isn't even the weights. And I think that's, the point that some of these women, it's the lack of respect. Um, because you don't, even if they're not lifting weights while they're playing, which many women, athletes don't, right? Like, we lifted weights in season, but we didn't lift weights going into our championship season. So we wouldn't have been
mhm,
actively lifting weights,
mhm,
as we were at our conference meet.
mhm,
But it's, you could still have the stationary bicycles or this, just stuff to warm up the muscle. Anyway, there's so much wrong with it there. But you know what? This is where social media, can be a change maker. And
yeah,
I think change will come from this. And I applaud these women for putting themselves out there and calling them on it. The
yeah,
NCAA is a pretty big monster, and that's a
yeah,
tough one to tackle. And
yeah,
I applaud them for doing it,
yeah,
because that's changed too, right? Think of the
yeah,
women who have rallied for change in the past, and they've
yeah,
really been kind of
yeah,
squashed.
yeah,
Um, and nobody's
yeah.
squashing them, which is great.
Yeah. No, it is. And for any of our listeners, if you have if I don't know, like, it'd be interesting to hear people's experiences about just their experience of it being in the gym, of lifting weights. I like the cerebral nature of it. I like it's a different kind of workout. I do love the chit chat. I like going with a friend. I wouldn't have that experience of going with my parents, or my teenager if I had one. I don't think I would. We might show up at the same time, but there's shared space, and I miss the gym. I really do. I look forward to going back. I haven't been in a year. I joke that my gym is now the golf course where I carry my bag, walk and carry.
Yeah.
But I look forward to returning to that space. And I have a feeling this would be talked about. This issue would be talked about in the gym, and I'm sure some of the people there might not agree with our sentiments. It'd be interesting to hear, different points of view on it.
I would love to hear differing opinions on this.
Um, but I wanted to just circle back to Carla Harris because I didn't know about the singing, but one of the descriptors of her, as a vice chairman at Morgan Stanley was that she, quote, I'm going to read what it says on the university's website, coaches others with negative motivation. That's her approach. Okay. So she leverages what people say cannot be done into energy to prove them wrong. So I thought that was so interesting. So her whole outlook is like, I'm going to show you otherwise, right? I'm going to prove you wrong. And I thought that was such an interesting way of framing it, because you hear negative motivation and you assume it's going to be something like, I don't know, that's negative in and of itself, right?
Right.
But what an interesting outlook. I don't know that that would be mine, but I like that they've named it and that it's part of her leadership style.
Yeah, and
So,
it'll be interesting to hear if she speaks to that too,
right?
and what she has to say
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, that is interesting.
And, it's possible just as a Black woman that's realistically her experience, right? I mean, what she's overcome, there's not many women, especially women of color, in a position as high as hers. So she's obviously proven many people wrong.
Right.
And um,
Kudos to her.
yeah, right. And her faithfulness. And one of my favorite Latari medal winners was Aaron Neville. So he's the Neville brothers. They were really popular in the 80s or 90s. He sang um, Ave Maria, and it's just incredible. That was really his speech. He just didn't have a lot to say. He thanked the sisters in New Orleans that taught him, and then he just busted into song. And I was crying. It was so beautiful. So
That is awesome. Yeah.
yeah, it's something to look forward to for any American Catholic,
Yes.
right? Yeah,
Absolutely. And I'm sure we'll be talking about that more come May when graduation season comes around.
yeah. Exciting.
So, in our spiritual stew, I had mentioned this week that this past week was the Feast of St. Joseph, March 19th. And it's interesting because in Luke's gospel this week, we hear the story of, the angel Gabriel coming to Mary and to tell her that she's with child. And, of course, we hear the words that Gabriel says, Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you, which, of course, is so familiar to us who say the Hail Mary. And Mary is afraid, right? As we all would be. And so there's a lot of focus on that, and her role in, Jesus's birth. But Joseph isn't mentioned as much. And, I have never really paid much attention to St. Joseph until my boys attended is their high school, Mount St. Joseph High School. And of course, there is a lot of talk of St. Joseph at Mount St. Joseph. And my boys actually have the day off on March 19th, whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. That is their day off to celebrate the Feast of St. Joseph. But when you really, and again, I went to Xavier, which was run by the sisters of the BVMs, the Blessed Virgin Marys, and just Catholicism in general. There's such a focus on Mary. So Joseph isn't somebody that I've thought much about, but it's really amazing when you do think of him and you think of the fact that he accepted this pregnant woman as his wife
Mhm.
who said to him, I'm pregnant. Crazy faith that he must have had, because I think most people would think Mary was a whack job. And he didn't, he embraced it in trusting not
Mhm.
only her, but, just all of the shame that must have come from
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's especially as a man who, at that time, and even in many ways today, the men have this whole image of who they think they should be, and he was so far from that. So it's been really kind of fun these past 5 years that we've been going to Mount St. Joseph to learn more about St. Joseph and to
Yeah.
kind of recognize his very important role that he plays, in our faith, for sure. And for my son, it was great, to have Friday off as the Feast of St. Joseph because that was the first
Oh.
day of March Madness, and
Oh, so it was truly the
it
holiday, the holy day was a holiday.
the holy day was a holiday, and he
Wow.
feasted on basketball. I mean, I think he would have watched the games at school anyway, which you don't want them to do, but
Yeah.
it coincided to be kind of a really neat day. So I just started thinking, I wonder if St. Joseph would be a basketball fan. I think he would have. I think he would have enjoyed. I think he would have enjoyed the first day of March Madness like we all did.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Haley shared with me a photo of Edward with his grandmother watching the games, four screens on, I think. And I love that. I think that's so many people just have that passion. And I think that's really one of the evidence of how we love sports and why we love sports, because it is really exciting to have a game at 10 a.m. on a Friday, right? And here he
Yeah.
is getting to watch it. And yeah, for that reason, I hope St. Joseph was a basketball fan. But to answer your question, Haley, the easy answer is we don't know if he would be a fit basketball fan. Why? Because he does not speak in the Gospels, and it's so interesting, right? That he is silent, and the only thing we know about Saint Joseph is through his example and how he lived. And I think you framed that so well about his experience, and it must have been a profound mystery to to take on what he did. And we know that he had dreams, and an angel kind of came to him to speak to him. But Father Jim Martin, so St. Francis, the school was founded by the Brothers of Holy Cross, and so St. Joseph is their patron. So we had a special liturgy, albeit virtual, on Friday while we were in class. And one of the pieces of the virtual liturgy was a talk by Father Jim Martin. And in his book, My Life with the Saints, he refers to St. Joseph as the hidden life, because again, we don't know much about him. We know that, for example, he wasn't at the wedding feast of Cana. So the assumption is he had probably died by then. We don't know that. We know that he trained a young Christ as the word I think technically is tekton, Tekton, which is really more of a craftsman than like a carpenter, because that part of the world, there's a lot of stone, and he wouldn't have been a mason, but he would have worked with some wood. So really kind of a craftsman. And that he accompanied Mary to the temple when Jesus was, so he was really, his life was in service. And that's why it's a gift that's why the Brothers of Holy Cross took him as their patron, because to be a brother, which a lot of people don't know about today, and I don't know if you would have known, I don't know how many people, even, cradle Catholics know about brothers, because they live hidden lives. They live lives of total service.
Yep.
In the past, in schools, they were, doing a lot of the work that we never see, cleaning schools, cooking, landscaping. And I loved his video because I thought, how many men and women live hidden lives? And he linked it to the pandemic this year. The
Oh,
people
interesting.
who are working that we don't see,
Right, right.
and they're working for the good.
Well, but and in reality, in that sense, Joseph is the ultimate role model for us, right? I mean, to not say and tell people what we think and feel or what we should be doing, but to actually just act in a way,
Mm-hmm.
and to be that silent servant. I mean, that would be my goal, and that I'm not doing a good job of, is being silent. But and it's
Yeah,
interesting.
podcast, Haley.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it wouldn't be a very interesting podcast
Yeah.
if we were
Yeah.
silent. But and I didn't know much about the difference between brothers and priests or monks, but even with the Brothers of Holy Cross, I really learned about them on the ND Trail when I walked that
Oh, sure.
3.5 years
Okay.
ago. Yeah, we walked with Brother Larry, God bless him. He shared with us all about, 320 miles is and 2 weeks is a long time to spend with people, and you really get to know them. And he shared all about his gifts and his servants' service, and not because he was telling us because he was proud of it or felt good about it, because we kept asking him, because we were fascinated by why you would choose to be a brother and not a priest, and it really was because he just wanted to do the work and not, sort of have the glory of the priesthood. So it was interesting. It was interesting to learn about the difference, between the Brothers of Holy Cross and the Priests of Holy Cross.
Yeah. You know, God continues to call people in just, I mean, you could say mysterious ways, wonderful ways. And today I was at Holy Cross Center in Berkeley for Mass. And when I walked out, I saw a poster, literally a poster of the number of vocations to Holy Cross. So the Congregation of Holy Cross, a number of young men. And Father Tom said, 6 of these are they are in formation to be brothers. And so, part of why I think young men are called to the priesthood is because of it's a very, you are leading the mass, you are preaching, you are, presiding over the Eucharist. And I don't want to say power because that's not the right word, but, there's leadership or servant leadership that they perform. And
Well,
yeah,
they're very visible, right? Priests are very
yeah,
visible. Yeah.
yeah, versus hidden, right? And so that men are called to something different, where they are called to live in poverty, they're called to be celibate, they're called to be obedient, and they are doing this in service to the people of God, right? And to the Lord himself. So I had no idea that there were that many vocations, and maybe that's our takeaway. I will pray for these people who have responded to God's call. That's awesome.
Yeah. It is.
Service.
Yeah, it is awesome. And how neat that you would just happen to see that when you're, on your way out. Your eyes were open, and you saw and learned there. And I think you had some other sightings this week where your eyes were open and you were seeing. So
Yes. Well, I love this idea of a spiritual vision. And, Ignatius Loyola talks about finding God in all things, and that in all things we can find God. And, so how do we see the spiritual life? And that's the whole point of sport and spirituality, is finding the spiritual in sport. So I'm open and curious about this idea of vision. And I can't take credit for seeing the poster. That was a friend, Chris, who pointed it out. So we'll give him the assist here. And but this week, on last Sunday, I walk out of my front door and I literally see Joe Montana, who's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And in San Francisco, he's beloved because he, had 3 Super Bowl championships with the Niners. And he was eating. I live above a restaurant, so there's a lot of people. But he's wearing a mask, and I'm like, oh, that's Joe, And then 4 days later, I'm at the PGA Superstore, and I'm walking out, and it's funny because I almost didn't go into the store, and it was just crazy. I was running around, and I walk out, and I'm like, that's Steve Young, and he also has won a Super Bowl for the San Francisco 49ers, Hall of Fame quarterback. And I'm standing next to him, and he plays golf in this tournament I go to every year. And so it's funny to me that in 1 week, I happened to see the two of the greatest Niner quarterbacks of all time.
iconic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so then I started to think, is that luck, or is that something different? And I have thought about this, like, how often are we seeing people? And, with both of them, I walked, and you kind of click and you just keep walking. And then it sunk in. I'm like, oh, no, that's Joe. That's Steve. Like, you realize this is somebody that I'm familiar with. And so I keep thinking of this ecosystem that we live in. We're swimming with all kinds of people. And who do we see and who do we not see? And why is it that, we do recognize people sometimes, or like your own son, like saw, Coach Harbaugh in South Bend, like masked and sunglasses and all. It is fascinating to me and I think in our own spiritual lives, God is always, that's part of the ecosystem, is my point. Like,
Yeah.
God is working, God's there. What do we see?
Well, and God is working and God's there, and what are our eyes open to, right? I mean,
Mm,
we have to be open to all of it, whether it's this, seeing Joe Montana or seeing God living out in
yeah.
the world. But you know what also I love about both those stories, your sightings, but also you're right. My son saw, we're of course Baltimore Ravens fans. John Harbaugh's Baltimore Ravens coach, and we got a text from my son James that I just saw John Harbaugh at Eddie Street Commons, and I love about both of those stories is that you were looking and you did see, and you and my son weren't staring at their phones. You were taking, so
Oh,
many people walk around
right.
and just miss life. That's
Hmm.
probably a whole nother topic. But it made me realize, what are we losing, in this world? What gifts and miracles
Yes.
even are we missing,
Yep.
when we're looking at our phones, when we're just walking down the street, or if we're not driving, somebody else is driving and we're looking at our phone in the car. That's
Yeah.
what a neat
Yeah.
experience that you would have missed
Yeah.
out on if you were looking at your
I
phone. And
know.
I think of that even more with my son, right? He's 19 and they live on their phones. And
Yeah.
he would have missed out on kind of this neat run-in
Yeah.
with his,
Yeah.
his team's
I know.
coach.
Right.
So, it's another thing to just remember, God's miracles are out there, and maybe running into Joe Montana and Steve Young or John Harbaugh is not a miracle, but it's
It
still
was,
it's still kind of a neat thing that makes you smile, and anything like that is always a gift from God. But we have to be open to seeing that.
yeah. Yeah. No, it was fun to think about, okay, who's next? You can't predict those things. And yeah, I always think, well, what do you risk if you are off your phone? Like, if I'm standing in line at Costco, wait, I could read an article. So I could make the argument for, looking at your phone,
Right,
to be fair. But sometimes you're just going to be bored. Okay. I like to make the argument for boredom.
for
I think
sure.
it's okay to be bored.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, I'm waiting in line. This isn't fun. I'm just here, but I'm present. I don't know. That's a really interesting spiritual discipline that we could talk about. Just maybe it's the exercise of presence. Like, I'm going to just be in the moment. I'm
Just
not
here.
going to be right. So,
All right, so that's a good takeaway for this week. I was thinking about I'm doubling down on my discipline for this week. I was traveling this past week. I was with friends. Was been with my parents. It's been awesome. But you just don't sleep as much, and you don't eat properly, and you don't kind of do the things you're supposed to do. And I've been a little cranky and snarky, and I don't love it.
oh,
So we've
yeah.
got 2 weeks till, less than 2 weeks till Easter, and I really want to refocus my efforts, just to kind of make sure that I am doing what I need to do to be the best person I can be,
Mhm. Yeah.
with clear mind and joyful soul, and you know what, maybe not looking at my phone so much.
Mm.
That would clear my head. So I think those are my takeaways. In addition to praying for our Holy Cross priests and brothers in
Yeah.
formation, because I love that, but also just kind of getting back to basics, and really kind of, going back to the simplicity that we were kind of at last year at this time, right? Life was
Mm.
very simple and basic going
Yeah.
into Holy
Yeah.
Week last year, this time, and a lot of uncertainty too. But there was something to be said for those very simple joys. So my goal is to get back to that.
I love it, Haley. Thank you. I'm gonna join you in that effort. So it's hard. That's the point of Gaudete, Gaud Latare. I missed that. So Gaudete is an Advent,
Mm,
3 weeks in. We're almost there. And Latare is the same spirit, rejoice, and we're almost there. So we have 2 weeks to go, and I want to feel good about, the Lenten obligation is for us, right? And to give something to God or whatever we're doing. So I want to feel like I don't know, I've run the race and I've done it well. So I'll join you in the effort of doubling down. And yes, praying for men and women who respond to religious life. And it is, I have a number of friends in religious life. It's an incredible choice. And
yeah.
um, yeah, so they need our support. They need lay friends, and we need them in our lives too. My life is better because I have them, and I think I offer something too. So
Absolutely. I would imagine your friendship means is huge to them for sure.
yeah,
Because not everyone treats them as people, right? And I know
right.
you do. I know
Right.
you are a
Yeah.
genuine friend, and friendship is a huge gift.
Yeah. Well, and I know Father Tom feels that way about you. So, because I heard it myself. So, yeah, it's good to have our community of faith, and those things I think develop because people show up and they share their gifts. So, anyone who is going to be part of a small community of faith, or seeking one, my advice on that would be two things: show up and, as best you can, share your gifts and talents. I think God takes care of the rest, right?
Absolutely, especially when our faith is down in our eyes and words are important. So
Good advice.
awesome. Well, I hope you have a great week. I'm so thankful that you are on the other side of this vaccine, and I hope you get well. And with that, I will invite you to the next stage of
On Palm Sunday, we'll have it. So
sounds great. Have a good one.
great. Peace and prayers. Thank you.